Summer Camp Island is a show created for Cartoon Network by Adventure Time writer and short film director Julia Pott. It has a peculiar debut story, first premiering with 20 episodes in a 48-hour marathon on a single July 2018 weekend. Over a year later, the rest of the 40-episode season finally premiered on the channel. Though it was renewed for 2 more seasons, it was not with Cartoon Network, but with HBO Max, one of the latest entries in the Great Streamer Wars. Needless to say, it kinda slipped under the radar of a lot of people, and I only found out about it in late 2020. Reading interviews with Julia, a UK native who moved to New York and the States in adulthood, are fascinating, from the way work on Adventure Time's influenced the show, to the somewhat surprising fact that, along with Rebecca Sugar, creator of Steven Universe, Julia is one of the 2 women to lead the creation of an original series on Cartoon Network. Note that in this video I'm only reviewing Season 1, which are those first 40 episodes that premiered on Cartoon Network. Now, this show has an aesthetic that's really hard to pin down. It's kiddish looking for sure, but carries emotional maturity in its characters. It's lighthearted and sweet, but also often quite mischievous. At first glance, the stylized visuals and music might make you pin it as a show for toddlers.
Old and moldy? Cute as new. Daddy Longlegs. Cutie Longlegs.
But then they'll throw in a great joke or a fairly complex idea that makes even an adult brain think.
Take that, you dumb elephant.
Shouldn't that pinata have candy in it?
Nope.
It's clear that this show is really accessible for a lot of audiences, and I admire that. I think the best word to describe its overall aesthetic is disarming or reassuring. Kind of like a show where you know that even in the most serious of conflicts, everything is going to turn out okay in the end. This idea really manifests in the show's writing and dialogue, and the pilot episode makes this abundantly clear. In the episode, Oscar, an elephant kid with a penchant for fun, is going to a summer camp with his more level-headed, straight-thinking best friend named Hedgehog. When the camp turns out to be magical in nature, Oscar's stress and anxiety begin to mount, and he struggles to find a niche. Yearning for home and opportunity presents itself, which he takes without hesitation. But in a sudden reversal, he recognizes his hastiness and lack of enthusiasm as close-mindedness, and returns to camp and his best friend for a second shot of embracing the new and unconventional camp. Okay, so I was in the Boy Scouts when I was younger, and I went to so many summer camps. On the first ever one, a group of us went to this one water park for the day. At the end of the trip, me and a friend I had made waited outside to be picked up by the unit leader, but they never came. It turns out they forgot us 2 at the water park. I was so scared and had to work up the courage to ask the lady at the front desk to call the camp and have them send someone to pick us up. Just like with Oscar's situation, there wasn't anything really huge at stake. I mean, my friend and I weren't in any real danger, but the emotional weight of the situation was intense nevertheless. Summer Camp Island capitalizes on these emotional conflicts and conveys them in very positive, very inclusive lights. And what's more is that it uses magic and fantasy to emphasize this. Now, a fault of shows that take place in fantastic or magical settings is that the writing can become dependent on the magic aspects, and you lose some of the humanity behind it, i.e., the part humans actually care about. Shows like Adventure Time understand this and tie in very human problems and emotions into even the most fantastical of situations. Summer Camp Island has no issue here and actually flips this idea on its head. Oftentimes, magic is used precisely to discuss emotions and more human aspects of the characters. A phenomenal example of this is in the episode titled Mom Soon, in which a cloud puncher named Scotty wants to impress her mom with her work. She gets rebuffed though, her mom telling her basically that she's not good enough.
But this episode's got me sizzling.
I just wanted you to be proud of me. You want me to lie?
Okay.
The amount of physical strength and dedication Scotty has to her craft is incredible. I mean, she's been doing this for 200 years and she's still nowhere near as successful as her mom wants her to be. Despite being a supernatural, almost deific creature, Scotty still endures the same problems any human would. Another great example of this is the episode Hedgehog Werewolf, in which Hedgehog, no surprise here, becomes a werewolf. But the classic trope is turned on its head when she finds community among the other werewolves. The episode quickly turns from being a hunt dedicated to restoring Hedgehog's humanity to a search for inner peace and solidarity. Again, the writers here are embracing the idea that monsters and fantasy can be mediums for endearing and emotional stories, just as much as they can be for epic adventures. And speaking of monsters, the characters known as such are single-handedly some of the best on the show. Their designs are so varied and atypical from that of the other characters, and their personalities come through nicely as well. Mortimer is hands down my favorite.
Mortimer, you smell like a lilac.
Oh, thank you.
Also, this episode where the monster mom takes children to her underground den and bakes cookies with them gives me serious Undertale vibes. Now, on the note of personalities, this is one of my few gripes with the show. The cast of characters is huge, though Oscar, Hedgehog, and Susie steal the spotlight for the majority of the episodes, and we rarely get to see the personalities or conflicts of other characters. Like, I really want to know more about Alexa's personality, or what else Alice likes besides cute things.
Ha ha ha. My name is Alice Pfefferman, and I can make anything cute!
Or something else about Pepper aside from the fact that he likes to take naps.
Pepper, you're a scamp. Have a badge.
I feel like the show tries to treat its characters in a way much like how the Peanuts or Ed, Ed, and Eddie does, with a dedicated cast whose members are always recognizable even when they're not in the scene. But unlike those shows, Summer Camp Island doesn't deliver on the personalities as well, or at least as consistently, and so many of the characters kind of lump together in my head as the other monsters, or the other campers, or the other witches. Though a few exceptions are Max, whose cool kid aesthetic really separates him from the others, and Lucy, whose interactions with Oscar and Hedgehog reveal some of her more mature, more pragmatic personality traits.
Get your parents' money, order pizza, go out in the streets of Manhattan. You go out by yourself?
As a counterargument to this idea, though, the simple nature of a lot of these characters really lends to the disarming, relaxed tone I mentioned earlier. Everyone on this island is so chill and laid back. If the creators tried to push a whole bunch of unique personalities on us, things would easily get out of hand. I guess I'm just saying additional bits of personality and character background would make the show stronger and the island itself a more compelling setting than it already is. But as for the main cast, Oscar, Susie, and Hedgehog complement each other perfectly, and the variety of ways in which they interact is one of the show's strongest points. Sometimes Oscar and Hedgehog are working together just to survive Susie's ridiculous demands. Other times, they are actually trying to help her with their troubles, which is really sweet. And the show sets up a great conflict between Oscar and Hedgehog, and that Hedgehog aspires to learn magic, whereas Oscar does not. I'm interested to see if in the later seasons this means that Hedgehog gets closer to Susie and the witches, while Oscar may get left behind. Humor-wise, I would compare this to Steven Universe, where character development and story take priority, and only incidental jokes and gags come to fill in the gaps. It does depend on the episode, though, with some revolving around simpler, more lighthearted plots that allow for lots of goofy expressions, fun banter, and comedic scenes.
Some nice stuff, Susie. It would be a shame if something were to get... Jeez. I mean, oops. Got your hat. Ooh.
Oscar, what are you doing?
The strongest element of humor probably comes from the animation, especially the facial expressions and voice acting.
Happy all alone birthday to me. No one wants to plan my party, which is totally fine. I feel fine about it. Happy birthday to me. What?
The magic concepts this show introduces are wonderfully inventive and playful. Like how in the episode Sneeze Guard, the living cartoon creatures of the island get infected by Allison's sickness. Or how these tiny alien creatures transmit emotion as a tangible resource between them, and when one of them harbors a secretive love, their society begins to fall apart. One of my favorite concepts is how the show treats time as both an entity and something like a location. And then you get creatures and people who live within time, or as the show puts it,
She's right here. She's just in between the seconds of the clock.
damn, that is so freaking cool! The animation and visual style has this docile quality to it, with soft colors, simple shading, large open spaces, and a stylized, simplified movement that feels almost like it was drawn by a kid at times. In a good way, though. The characters never crash or slam into things or get beat up. They bounce and squish and only ever get a bruise, maybe. There are plenty of poofy clouds, smiling trees, and subtle background gags that make you smile. Visually, it's the absolute antithesis to shows like Ren and Stimpy or The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy.
Mandy and I are only here to help you.
Stay away from my eyes!
Another nice visual touch is the use of older tech in a lot of these episodes. Cassette decks, clunky computer monitors, VHS tapes, landline phones, and box radios are some great examples. And these subtleties are some of the cherries on top of the show's charming visuals and lend to that sense that this world is in another place and another time different from that of our own. Now, the last criticism I have, and this might just be a personal thing, is when the show's aesthetic tips a little too far towards saccharine or babyish. It's really rare, occurring in just a few episodes that I didn't particularly enjoy. Like in the episode Computer Vampire, Oscar can't finish a cursed computer game because he's too freaked out about the vampire antagonist, even though it's a game designed for kids younger than him. When the game comes to life, different campers on the island manifesting as the in-game characters, he is forced to face his fears. But, the vampire is now his friend, right? So his fear kind of feels unwarranted, and the episode's conflict kind of shallow. I mean, maybe he has a phobia of bats or vampires, sure, but the show doesn't convey this.
Congratulations, Oscar. You managed to beat a game designed for 8-year-olds.
Exactly. The whole thing feels a bit too childish for me to be invested or care about Oscar here. Or in the episode Mr. Softball, Oscar is intent on playing a fair game of softball against the witches who are blatantly cheating. He eventually succumbs to pressure and begins to cheat himself. But at the end of the episode, the writers basically pull a deus ex machina and kind of avoid the whole conflict of whether cheating is okay or not.
Susie, you know you can't disobey the chore wheel.
It's almost like the episode's saying, hey, if you see someone cheating or you're being pressured to cheat, go call in an adult instead of dealing with the situation yourself. And not that this is bad advice, but it kind of feels pandering, or like it's giving us a lesson instead of showing the true struggles of characters who grow, learn, and develop on their own. But this happens fewer than a handful of times. The emotional conflicts and struggles of the characters, especially when focused on Hedgehog or Susie, are almost always compelling and enjoyable to follow. In some ways, Summer Camp Island is a successor to Adventure Time, with its fantastical setting and emotion-driven storytelling. But I see it more as its own show, existing in a new era of cartoons inspired by Adventure Time's legacy. From its adorable characters and visuals to the way it maturely tackles children's emotions, Summer Camp Island stands out to me as one of a kind, and I encourage you to check it out. I've had a peek at Season 2, and I'm already excited for where the show takes things next. But until next time, farewell.
Time has taken what it wanted and left us just what we needed.
Time drank the soup with a straw.